This video is about how not to completely botch it up when you're writing a male character. And yes, this is aimed at female authors, but I also think guys could probably benefit from it too. Now, my last video was about how not to write women, so if you missed that, check it out and make sure not to miss the comments section, which things got a little heated there. But for now, we're gonna concentrate on 9 mistakes authors make when writing men, and we're gonna start with number 1, physical fantasies. The first mistake I say semi-frequently is wishful smells. Unless your male character is a lumberjack, they are not going to smell like wood. And especially if you have a teenage character in a YA book, they do not smell of cedar and leather. I'm just gonna be honest, they smell like socks in locker rooms. A second really annoying fantasy is random physicality. Here is an example of something you should never write. His shoulders flexed powerfully as he opened the door. Folks, it's a door. It does not require any flexing to open. There's just no need to make up random physical events for your male characters to flex their muscles. And lastly, number 3, ripped with 0 effort. Unless your male character is getting 3 hours in the gym and they have a personal trainer and a nutritionist, they're just not gonna have a body like Thor. You want to treat male character bodies in a respectful and authentic way, similar to the way that you wish other authors might treat female bodies. The second mistake when writing men is giving them a genius level emotional IQ. So listen, not every good man out there has a super high emotional IQ. Guys say stuff that tends to be misinterpreted. Guys often miss opportunities to speak, like say the wife is in front of the mirror preening and you are concentrating on something else and you miss the perfect opportunity to say like, oh, you look so beautiful. Yeah, that's a total hypothetical example. That never happened. If your male character always says the right sensitive things at exactly the right sensitive time, then you are not writing a man, you are writing an idealized projection of a man. You're basically writing a mannequin for female readers to get off on. Yeah. I know there is an emotional spectrum out there, and there's a lot of guys who are extremely emotionally tuned. But I think that women have the tendency to write men as all having this emotional IQ equivalent to like Einstein's actual IQ. Now, I think the opposite is also true. Female authors will sometimes write the villainous main character, like, you know, the husband that leaves her or something, as having the emotional IQ of a rock. This third mistake is probably the most controversial one in this whole video. It is number 3, sexual fidelity as key morality. I know the comments section is gonna sizzle with debate and disagreement on this one, but just hear me out. It is a problem when every single male hero ends up being laser focused on their female partner, as if no other women exist in the world. And sometimes it doesn't seem like they even have a personality trait other than obsession. So my advice would just be not to have every single heroic male character be written as naturally, crazily, unifocally monogamous. Now, it's fine to have them act monogamous. It's perfectly fine to have a heroic male character who is attracted to other women, but who remains true to their spouse or partner. Now, the flip side holds true as well. Don't have every single villainous main character be evil because they are a cheater. Sometimes they are evil for completely different reasons. Just like some men write women as though their main value is in terms of their physical beauty, sometimes women write men as though their main value is in terms of sexual fidelity. The fourth mistake some authors make when writing male characters is making them only a romance option. So ask yourself, do you have a male character in your book who exists for a purpose other than romance? Do they have a role to play in the plot other than just coupling with the female lead? Really, this is analogous to the sexy leg lamp test that I mentioned in my video about how to write female characters well. Let's call the male version the sexy Greek statue test. If your male can be replaced by a sexy Greek statue throughout the whole story, then they're not a real character. Now, for an example of this, I find this to be often the case in Hallmark style movies. The main male lead just exists to fulfill the relationship fantasy of the female main lead. So you avoid this just by having the male character play some sort of role in the narrative. This next mistake that is sometimes made with male characters is number 5, deeply improbable contradictions. So what I see with these characters is a hyper-masculine character in one area, but then all the rest of them is feminine and soft and exactly what a woman would want. For instance, he is a motorcycle mechanic who just happens to be the best listener of all time. Or he is a ruthless billionaire CEO who is also the best father and the best chef and the best lover. So these aren't characters, these really are just projections of female fantasies. Now, if you're writing romance, you probably want to commit some of the mistakes I'm mentioning in this video because you're not trying to deliver a real human being to the reader. You're trying to deliver a fantasy. But if you're writing in any other genre, it's usually best to try to find a way to portray your male characters as being actually human rather than sort of cardboard cutouts of a fantasy. Now, this next point is actually the opposite of that last point. It is number 6, the stereotype. Now, number 5 was about wild contradictions smashed into each other, but sometimes authors have the opposite problem and they create this stereotype of man where everything is like hyper-masculine. And if you're worried that this is the sort of error that you fall into, I would recommend taking the John Wayne test. The John Wayne test simply asks, is there at least one trait about your male character that is not stereotypically masculine? Perhaps something that just rounds them out and makes them feel like a real human being. For instance, if your male character is defined entirely by devotion to their work and their sports team and their convertible, then you probably want to find a way to round them out a little bit and give them some dimension. I think a good example of this might be PETA in the Hunger Games. If you remember, he's a baker. That's not, stereotypically masculine, I feel like. The 7th common error is male friendships. When female writers try to write about male friendships, usually like guys just hanging out with each other in a group, they often end up projecting female relationship values onto those group of guys. So I find that those relationships end up looking a little bit more nurturing, a little bit more supportive, and a little bit more confidential than I'm used to when it's real guys hanging out. For instance, a female friend of mine gave a book to one of my male friends to read, and he asked her, why are your male characters always complimenting each other? Because that felt a little weird to him. Like, that's not normally how guys relate all the time. There's a lot more competition and one-upsmanship. There's a lot more ribbing. There's a lot more physicality, like guys hitting each other, and there's a lot more sometimes off-color humor. Now, obviously, these are really broad stereotypes, but I think it's helpful to remember when you're trying to write how a group of guys would hang out. And here's an 8th mistake you can fall prey to when trying to write men: mono emotions. So what is it with so many male characters being brooding? Like, they just brood, and you're like, is there any other aspect of your personality that we should know about, or is it just the brooding? Another really common mono emotion that I see in male characters is sometimes they'll just always be angry. They're just constantly filled with rage. And often the way that this rage gets manifested is that every single bad character ends up being a domestic abuser. And after a while, I'm like, are there any male characters in novels who are bad and do not domestically abuse their partners? Now, hear me out here. I'm not saying don't write domestic abuse male characters. Like, no, obviously those exist. Obviously those need to be represented in fiction. I'm saying if every single male character in your book is always filled with anger or rage, I think that's kind of a stereotypical problem, and you want to examine that. All right, and now we are down to our very last point, number 9, men in general. Now, so far everything we've talked about in this video has been about the male leads, the male protagonists, or one of the main characters. So this point is about minor characters, minor male characters. Remember that the way you write the opposite sex is often not revealed by the way you treat the major characters, because you spend so much time on them and you're extra careful, you don't make those common mistakes. But with minor characters, you sort of get a little sloppy because they're just a minor character, like it doesn't matter that much. The most common mistake that male writers make is sort of erasing female characters from the background and just not having very many minor female characters. The typical mistake that women make, on the other hand, is they make all the male minor characters into evil characters. They are all cheaters, they are all rapists, they are all spousal abusers. So just try this quick test on your book. I call it the scoundrel syndrome. Do you have at least one male character in your book who is not one of the main characters, who is depicted as a decent human being? So a few caveats. It can't be a love interest, right? It can't be part of a love triangle that the female character is trying to choose between. It also can't be a gay best friend. I say that because sometimes the women will write the gay character sort of as fulfilling the role of a female best friend. The gay character is non-threatening toward the female character, and that's why the author feels like it's okay to have that character be morally fine. So that doesn't count either. Anyhow, I hope that helped you when trying to write male characters in your novels. And if you haven't seen my video on how to write women, go watch that now.